She's beautiful.
Why was the princess such a hit in this most cynical and world-weary city? Perhaps it was because she was still only 24 years old. And here she was, being feted by the head of the world's greatest superpower, and taking her place among the leading figures of the day on both sides of the Atlantic. Even in Hollywood, superstar success seldom comes quite so young. Whatever the reason, an invitation to the White House reception was the hottest ticket in town.
Going to dance with the princess, Mr. Travolta?
She'd like you to.
What sort of dance would you choose for preference?
Oh, something of her choice.
Nancy and I are deeply honored to welcome the Prince and Princess of Wales to the White House. Permit me to add our congratulations to Prince Charles on his birthday just 5 days away, and express also our great happiness that we have been able to have this affair with Princess Diane here on her first trip to the United States, that we should be able to share in that first trip.
The princess was now being projected as one of Britain's great national assets. She was the one everyone wanted to see, the most talked about, the most popular, the most photographed woman in the world. Her problem was to make sure she wasn't exploited beyond the boundaries she herself set. It wasn't an easy course to follow. The adulation that accompanied her every move was a temptation to those who wanted to bolster British exports to enhance the country's image. But that really was Charles's job, and it wasn't easy for him continually being upstaged by his glamorous wife. There's no question that these royal events, this was a visit to Hong Kong, gave the princess increasing confidence. Those who followed the tours could see the change in her, from the rather camera-shy, diffident young woman to someone who needed less and less confidence building from her husband on these official occasions as the years passed by. But here again, the fact that the princess was obviously beginning to enjoy her public role, that she was getting to grips with the idea that she would one day be the royal consort, that she no longer always needed Prince Charles at her side, was interpreted in numerous books and articles as a sign that her marriage was in trouble.
Back home in Britain, Diana's engagements were now almost exclusively solo affairs, and they were different. Members of the royal family had been patrons of charities before, but Diana altered the whole concept, breaking down barriers, holding hands with AIDS patients, touching people, without any of the formality of previous royal visits. She found herself drawn to people who were on the margins of society, drug addicts, the homeless. Battered this, battered that, as she later put it. She seemed to find an affinity with the dispossessed, the disadvantaged.
Thanks so much.
I'll give you a discount.
Sometimes her comments seemed to be about the pain in her own life as much as the suffering of those she was tending.
Ladies and gentlemen, I have it on very good authority that the quest for perfection our society demands can leave the individual gasping for breath at every turn. From early childhood, many had felt they were expected to be perfect, but didn't feel they had the right to express their true feelings to those around them. Feelings of guilt, of self-revulsion, and low personal esteem, creating in them a compulsion to dissolve like a disprin and disappear.
But there was no dissolving and disappearing for Diana. She continued with her charity work. One or two observers commented on how thin and drawn she'd become, but very few knew she had an eating disorder. Diana believed that her marriage was being undermined by the re-emergence of Camilla Parker Bowles, a long-standing friend of Prince Charles. There were 3 of us in the marriage, she later said, so it was a bit crowded. On a visit to the Taj Mahal, one of the world's supreme monuments to love, Diana's pose was deliberately symbolic. She was isolated in a loveless marriage and felt a deep sense of betrayal. Diana's bitterness was exposed in the pages of a book by Andrew Morton. It gave voice to the silences and discretion the royal family traditionally lived behind. She said she'd hoped the book would give people a better understanding. The papers had a field day. The storm unleashed by the publication of Andrew Morton's book began to take its toll on official events. This was the royal tour of Korea. It was a public relations disaster. The glum faces and stony expressions said it all. It was now becoming clear that the situation couldn't go on. No further pretense was possible.
I wish to inform the House that Buckingham Palace are at this moment issuing the following statement. It reads as follows. It is announced from Buckingham Palace that, with regret, the Prince and Princess of Wales have decided to separate. Their Royal Highnesses have no plans to divorce, and their constitutional positions are unaffected. This decision has been reached amicably, and they will both continue to participate fully in the upbringing of their children. Their Royal Highnesses will continue to carry out full and separate programmes of public engagements and will from time to time attend family occasions and national events together.
With the failure of her marriage now officially announced, any hope that press interest in her activities might ease off was soon dispelled. At a charity lunch, she surprised everyone by announcing her withdrawal from most of her official activities.
When I started my public life 12 years ago, I understood the media might be interested in what I did. I realized then their attention would inevitably focus on both our private and public lives. But I was not aware of how overwhelming that attention would become, nor the extent to which it would affect both my public duties and my personal life in a manner that's been hard to bear.
Diana's attempts to withdraw from public life made little difference to the media. The royal drama was taking on a momentum of its own. Secret tape recordings of leading players were publicly accessible. To try to set the record straight, at Highgrove, Prince Charles agreed to tell his side of the story in an interview with Jonathan Dimbleby. On the day Prince Charles confessed adultery, Diana made a high-profile, highly glamorous appearance and later decided to tell her story.
The most daunting aspect was the media attention, because my husband and I, we were told when we got engaged that the media would go quietly, and it didn't. And then when we were married, they said it would go quietly, and it didn't. And then it started to focus very much on me. And I seemed to be on the front of a newspaper every single day, which is an isolating experience. And the higher the media place you, is the bigger the drop. And I was very aware of that. But then here was a situation which hadn't ever happened before in history, in the sense that the media were everywhere. And here was a fairy story that everybody wanted to work. And so it was isolating, but it was also a situation where you couldn't indulge in feeling sorry for yourself. You had to either sink or swim.
In 1996, the Prince and Princess were finally divorced. The disaster she wanted to avoid was now upon them. She lost her title of Her Royal Highness, but she was still anxious to find a suitable role for herself.
Thank you.
I'd like to be an ambassador for this country. I'd like to represent this country abroad. As I have all this media interest, let's not just sit in this country and be battered by it. Let's take these people out and to represent this country and the good qualities of it abroad. When I go abroad, we've got 60 to 90 photographers just from this country coming with me. So let's use it in a productive way to help this country.
It was one of the many ironies in Diana's life that she never did become an official ambassador for Britain, though weeks before her death, discussions were underway to provide her with a new, positive role. Often, for example on a visit to Imran Khan, who was an opposition MP in Pakistan, she was accused of political naivety. Her most recent cause was against the manufacture of anti-personnel landmines. She made trips to Bosnia and Angola, continually drawing attention to the human misery caused by the millions of mines left behind, unseen and undetected, long after conflicts were resolved.
First day I was in Quito.
Again, some people saw this as straying into the political arena. Most of the public saw nothing untoward in Diana's campaign. But it won her some enemies in Westminster.
Ma'am, the government minister's home has said you're a loose cannon by supporting this campaign. Do you have any reaction to that?
I don't know, I'm only trying to highlight a problem that's going on all around the world. That's all.
It's been said, though, that you're aligning yourself with Labour policy. Do you think that's wise?
Labour? I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know what you're...
We need to move on.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Despite the criticisms, Diana's landmine campaign was beginning to pay off. Many countries began to rethink their policies in the light of public disquiet generated by the publicity. Diana's ability to change the lives of people she met was a quality she shared with the late Mother Teresa. Their relationship was warm and sympathetic. After the years of turmoil, it seemed that Diana was reaching a new, more confident public stance. She was learning to cope with an independent role on the world stage.
$10,000. At 10,000, 11,000. Thank you, madam. 12,000.
The gesture that emphasized her increasing detachment from the past came in June 1997, when Christie's auctioned off 79 ball gowns and dresses that had featured on so many front pages over the years. Her favourite causes, including cancer and AIDS, benefited by some £3.5 million. But despite Diana's attempts to create a serious, meaningful role for herself, the media, specifically the stills photographers, remained fascinated by the ordinary details of her daily life.